Welcome one more day to space and Harmonia, which is a word that I chose because it can be interpreted in different profound ways. On one hand, enharmonia, altogether, as you might know, refers to a quality shared by notes that sound almost the same but they are different. They are called enharmonic notes. And likewise, we also have different gifts, talents, characteristics, even though we can express similar qualities and be in tune with the common vibration of true love, true life. And in order to express our gifts and be in tune with life, we have to be in armonía. In Spanish, we would say en armonía. And I say armonía and not harmony because true armonía does not harm. This is a tragedy of language. When we don't use language consciously, it casts spells on our consciousness, especially if we use harmful words such as harmony, or when we say revelation, to veil again, when we are trying to imply unveiling. Therefore, to be in armonía means be integrated into the flow of true life with integral consciousness, knowing and understanding the language we use, be in tune with everything that happens, regardless of the quality of the experience, positive, negative. We have to be in armonía with all life, all experiences, all people, with ourselves, our thoughts, emotions, even the most painful. And in my view, this is the true meaning of the so-called divine verb, which in Hebrew was expressed as Yud, He, Vav, He. There is a movement known as the divine word that in itself is a wholeness that implies flowing with pure supraconditional love and modified life, integral conscience in serenity as a consequence of true armonía, true integration. However, when this divine verb is broken because love is not expressed or life is modified, then elements of life, such as intelligence or certain feeling, also splits off and becomes contrary to life, to a pure feeling of love. And that is actually the origin of what we could call stepmother nature, fallen entities, fallen beings that become adversaries to themselves, to nature. It's part of the divine verb that broke off. And that's why we can speak of a fallen divine verb, which many translate as Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahweh. But that's the fallen interpretation, the religious use of language which involves a separation from true life. Therefore, we can use those religious names in reference to the false divine verb, the broken intelligence of love. And later on, you'll see there are intelligences that were expressed in certain myths. They were known as Enki, the lord of wisdom, the earth and water, Sophia, wisdom, Ophis, the serpent. And when those intelligences broke off from the movement of true life, they generated their own world, their own wisdom, and this is what made the universe fall. This is even expressed in the book of Proverbs, as we will see. But in order to understand all this in depth, we have to remember who we are as part of the movement of true life. And for me, this was such a profound discovery that I think is part of my mission to express this message, because it helped me to integrate very painful experiences, and be very sure about who I am. Enharmonia is also a word that contains the expression ena, which in Aramaic means I, the real I. Actually, when the master Yeshua was asked who he was, he said, I am, ego eimi in Greek, ena in Aramaic. That was the language that he used in childhood. And this I amness is a reference to the true conscience and will that must be expressed through us. The true I or self is not necessarily an expression of something selfish, egotistic, even though there are many spiritualities that claim that spiritual evolution consists in eliminating all sense of ego. This is not true. This is an illusion, because spiritual evolution is unfolding our true potential, our true I amness, growing like a tree of life from a seed. But what is expressed through us in true life and love is the I amness, the witnessing conscience and consciousness of the Holy One, not our own particular human consciousness or animal consciousness. We are speaking about something else. And in a sense, this intelligence is suffering through us because the universe broke off. And in ancient times, this was known as the sacrifice of the cosmic lamb. In the book of Apocalypse, chapter 13, versicle 8, we read that the lamb was sacrificed before the foundation of the world, even though it says kataboles to cosmou, before the throwing of the cosmos, because the cosmos was thrown outside the tree of life, the true functioning of the universe. And therefore, particles, atoms of light consciousness, fell into vessels, creatures of different degrees of evolution, and therefore it began to suffer because of this separation. Therefore, a mission of rescue was required, and that is why we also speak of the necessity of a universal Messiah, a notion connected to salvation. And this universal Messiah existed since the foundation of the fallen world, even before, because it's the intelligence that comes from the infinite source of true loving light. But for us, it became a savior, but also our true I amness, because it's meant to be expressed through each one of those creatures that can express true love and life fully. And even Master Ishu said, "My body will be given for you." And religious people say, well, he was referring to his physical body. He was going to be sacrificed to pay for the sins of the world because his father sent him as a sacrifice. But this is an animalistic, barbaric way of thinking, very common in all religions. He was not referring to his physical body. He was referring to his spiritual body that was going to be multiplied as a new genome, spiritual DNA that can reproduce in other members of the collective messianic body. And many of us contain that seed of light that he planted. Actually, many of us have been developing that seed, and it's no longer a seed, nor an embryo. It's maybe a baby or a child soul growing, learning. And years ago, actually 22 years ago, I had a very profound vision that makes me think when our soul grows, it also experiences an immolation, a sacrifice for the world. I was very young at that time, about 17, 18 years old, and I was walking through an extension of grass. It was natural, apparently. I think it was a twilight because the sky was somehow dark. And about 30, 40 meters away from me, there was a mound. And on top of that mound, I saw what seemed to be a portal of light, very intense light. So I walked towards the portal slowly, and soon I started to walk up that sort of mound. And when I got close enough, I realized it was not a portal of light, but rather a mirror. And therefore, it was the reflection of my true self, so to say. And in that instant, in that realization, the mirror shattered in millions of pieces. And I became each one of those little pieces. And I expanded towards the infinite. My consciousness expanded until I lost consciousness completely and I woke up on bed. And after so many years, I tried to guess the meaning about all this, and I didn't realize until very recently. I think when we have a true soul of light that has been growing in different existences, it comes a point in which it can also experience an immolation like that of the Master and incarnate, so to say, in different existences, in different lives, in order to expand the action of light. And this requires wisdom and understanding in true conscience. And this is precisely what the first civilizers of humanity did not do, because they brought wisdom and they brought knowledge, but these were fallen. It comes to mind the action of Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, Waters, and the Earth. The myth in Sumeria says that Enki was asleep in the Apsu, the underworld, and his mother, Namu, which is stepmother nature, asked Enki to wake up because his sleep was causing the suffering of the gods. And as you might know, in Sumerian mythology, Enki was then responsible for the formation of humanity with civilization, arts, sciences, religion. The myth says Enki sent 7 Abgalu, great humanoids, fish, amphibious beings, to instruct humans. Actually, there is a very famous legend about Oannes, the fish god, that came out of the Persian Gulf waters and instructed the humans of Babylon in different arts and sciences. And obviously, this is literal. I already told you about my encounter with a humanoid amphibious being. There is a video about that. I leave it in the description box below. And to me, it's very clear humanity was instructed by other beings. Some of them can be regarded as Adamic. Actually, the first Galu word called Adapa. And Adapa is the Sumerian version of the Hebrew Adam. So we receive wisdom from Adamic species that were not like us, but we have inherited genetic material. Obviously, all humans have webbed hands. We don't descend from the apes. In any case, it would be the other way around. And we didn't learn the arts and sciences of civilization by means of trial and error. That's ridiculous. It was given to us by our forefathers in a human sense. And this led many to think the so-called Enki, the god of wisdom, is the father of humanity, which in a sense is the father of modern humanity. Some even claim that Enki is the father of Jesus Christ, as they say. And this is generating a new religion, which implies dealing with the names of deities that many don't understand because they cannot guess what they really mean. To me, the so-called god Enki is not so much an entity, a particular character that existed in the past, but rather an archetype of intelligence that was incarnated by different species. Maybe they were amphibious or serpentoid, but this is not the important thing, because what we have to understand is the kind of intelligence, the kind of wisdom they were using. It was disconnected from the true movement of life. They tried to bring humanity out of conditions of slavery, suffering, pain. This is told in myths. But something else took place because nature was modified, things were done without understanding, and therefore nature broke off. And this brought something else, which is the response from nature, from stepmother nature, because the mother got angry and whacked the sons. Not only our forefathers, but our humanity, which is even more ignorant. This is why we are receiving constant whacks by Mother Nature or stepmother nature. And these are very painful whacks. She slaps on our face and pats on our butt constantly because we break the laws. In most cases, just because we are ignorant, and this is a tragedy because there is no need. So we have to understand the ways of nature, respect her, don't accuse the architects of nature for doing what they do. Obviously, the so-called Yud Heh Hey Elohim, which is that divine mother comprised of different architects of nature, sometimes exerts painful actions, corrections. But this is like our immune system. When we eat something too much and become allergic to a certain food because we are under stress and have been misusing our emotions, our thoughts, and even food, then our body is going to respond violently, causing inflammation, rashes, even autoimmune diseases. Cancer is an autoimmune disease in which cells grow fast and more than they should. Why? Because there is an obstruction of life. There is no flow of blood, and there is congestion, there is an excess of acidity, cells have no oxygen, therefore stepmother nature is forced to get the oxygen and blood supply with more cells. This is an intelligent response. Well, is the response of nature. It's not what it should be, but this is because there is a disconnection from the true flow of life and love. Therefore, we have to remember the source that goes even beyond Mother Nature, and that's the Holy Father, the so-called supraconditional love that goes through all conditions, harmonizes everything with integral conscience manifested by the Son, the archetype of the Son. The Word is that expression, that movement of life. And we can say that the so-called Word or Divine Verb is a father because it seeds its own intelligence. It's a mother because it becomes a womb or environment where that intelligence of love grows. It's a son because there is an engender intelligence. And it's also a daughter because it rescues those particles, atoms of life and consciousness that got lost. This is the meaning of Yud, Hey, Bab, Hey, father, mother, son, daughter. And when the daughter is united to the mother, then we have Yud, Hey, Bab. That's the real meaning of the Tetragrammaton, the Divine Verb, which is not a God, because God is a theological concept that means some entity, intelligence, that created some creatures and governs like a king, with a son in some theologies, and servants, archangels, angels. What the Divine Verb is expressing is a movement of unicity from a unity. And what is even more extraordinary, the Holy One expands in every single atom element of that unicity. So it's not somewhere but everywhere, growing within each one in different degrees, because not everyone can receive love and life and light in the same degree. But we as humans can receive the fullness, the pleroma, as it is known in Greek, because we can be an expression of the true face of the Father, Mother. We can express true supraconditional love without modifying life, respecting her, with integral conscience, living in serenity. And this means overcoming the tricks of civilization. We are not worshipping the arts and sciences transmitted by the God of wisdom, no matter how clever and wonderful these spiritual teachings seem. Spiritual teachings or technologies, because everything we receive from the ancient gods is fallen and led to all religions, arts, sciences. This does not mean culture is bad in itself, but what we have to cultivate is true life. And we have already the seed of understanding in ourselves. Now, I'd like you to pay attention to something which is very profound. It's in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3. This is attributed to King Solomon. He said, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, Chokmah, and the one who gets understanding, Binah. For the gain from her is better than the gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. With wisdom Yud He Vav He founded the earth, Eretz. With understanding Binah, the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh established the Shemaim, the heavens, with its knowledge that broke through the abysses, and the clouds drop down the dew, tal in Hebrew. Now all this is amazing because it's telling about the elements that took place in the foundation of the universe. And in the book of Proverbs, we even find how everything broke off. In Proverbs 9, we are told that wisdom built her house, raised her 7 pillars, mixed her wines, her genetics, species, and set the table for sacrifice, feeding, when in true life there is no sacrifice, not necessarily a sacrifice of other beings. We sacrifice our egoism and give our love to others. But in the true harmonia of life, no one is sacrificed for use. No one is altered. There is no genetic modification of any kind, which is actually what the fallen architects did, trying to correct what they thought were conditions of chaos, instead of trying to understand why there was chaos. Chaos came because intelligences of nature thought they didn't have supply of energy and they made their own vessels. That's what the book of Proverbs is telling. This is known as the fall of Sophia, who gave birth to Yaldabaoth in the Gnostic myth, even though Gnosticism gets very negative and very pessimistic, and we are controlled by archons, where in a sense there are fallen entities that try to control humanity, but they are not as powerful as people think they are. They are not as many as some think they are. And when we have the true intelligence of the universal master grown within, we can even command angels, archangels, because we come from the Holy One directly. And not even archons, rulers, have power over us. This is the true understanding and the true wisdom and the true conscience, not knowledge. Because look what the chapter 3 of the book of Proverbs says. With its that broke through the abysses. That is knowledge based on data, which leads to a fragmented consciousness. And it doesn't speak of one abyss, but abysses, because when there is a fall of consciousness, there are as many abysses as beings perceiving with fallen consciousness. Even the architects of nature can fall into abysses. They are the so-called angels and archangels, which are not perfect. They make mistakes as well, because they can get split from the movement Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And this is also why it is said the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh corrects us. It's not punishment from a god, but rather a consequence of breaking the movement, the harmonious movement of true love and life. To me, understanding this movement is the key of finding serenity, wholeness. And more I realize that when I suffer, when I feel disconnected, sad, anxious for something I wish I had but I don't have, I am falling into the abyss of my mind. I'm not understanding something. I'm missing the point of this movement. Therefore, to me, meditating on this divine verb is essential, so that we can find wholeness again, allowing true conscience grow through ourselves. Because in the end, what suffers in us is life, and life comes from the Holy One. Therefore, the one who is really suffering in us is the Holy One. We are not separate from the divine. Therefore, taking care of ourselves is taking care of the divine. And by taking care of the divine life in us, obviously, we open ourselves to the help of true Divine Mother, which nurtures us and gives us what we need in the moment where we need it. We don't need to use any complicated wisdom or technique or worship to any external God. We get it because everything has been prepared for us, especially when we are part of the so-called messianic body of salvation. Some of us come here to help, not to pay for karma, for debts, because giving ourselves for true love is the greatest sacrifice that can be made. And this also implies leaving behind religion, even words full of religious content, including the word Messiah, which is full of religious connotations. We can speak about the universal master of salvation and use Messiah when we know exactly what we are implying. Messiah comes from Messe, that in Egypt meant crocodile, because the pharaohs anointed themselves with the fat of crocodiles, and this was connected to the anointed of kings. But we have to be anointed with conscience, which is the integration of wisdom and understanding in a sphere of virtue that includes the true awareness of all the qualities of the tree of life in us. And this conscience has to grow. And it's really the key missed by Enki, or even the key missed by Mother Nature on her own. Because she has her own ways of rectifying things, and those ways are not necessarily harmonious. Sometimes stepmother nature is terrible, very wacky, and this should not be something to fear. Many speak of the fear of the Lord in reference to that dark aspect of the architects of nature, but we can also speak of respect or of the cosmos. And to me, it's like having respect for a huge wave. Obviously, if you see a gigantic wave coming towards you, you better don't stay in front of it, because it's going to make it roll and roll, and this is very painful. You can get drawn. I have experienced that playing with waterboards many times. I love the sea, and I've seen many gigantic waves, and I love them so much that sometimes I waited until the last moment to pass down the waves, but sometimes I got caught up in the rolling wave, and this is very much like a confusing life. It can even make us lose the joy for living. And it's not time for that. Now it's a moment for connecting with this flow of true loving life, remembering the true wisdom contained in the Tetragrammaton. Why not? We do not have to be Jewish, Hebrew, Christian, any label. This is a living experience. But for now, I think it's enough. So thank you very much for listening. And until the next time, let's keep opening a space so that the movement of true supraconditional love and modified life, integral conscience, and deep blissful serenity can grow through our particular enharmonia.